unguarded moments, so eyeing each other up and down. Well, one imagines, and they're all dear friends, and I say, if any of you know them or recognise them, I don't mind telling them I've shown this, because I'm just merely showing three men talking. But one imagines, everyone, you know, as you do when you talk to someone, there's this constant evaluation and comparison, not necessarily in any damaging way, but quite often, sadly, yes, it is. Often people are trying to assert their status over others, literally they're standing over others. I think this is a human nature taken to extreme, and that is where you use symbols. Human beings, compared to primates, par excellence, think metaphorically, and I think that's a big difference between us and chimps, say, is you never see a chimp with a symbol of tribal status around its neck, do you? Even though chimps live in hierarchies and they're very dexterous, they never have, say, a necklace symbolizing status, as our ancestors have done for a long time. We use one thing to stand for something else. And my own view is using symbols or certain behaviors, we can go into that later, that's how we establish our individuality. And I'm saying that in a benign sense. I'm not saying it's in a snobby sense, although sadly it's often diverted to that way. It's more establishing your individuality, being someone. We all want to do this. Sadly, when it's taken to extreme, or one thinks one's better than others, that's unfortunate, but it's more differentiating yourself from someone else, being personal. You might choose to do this. This stands for something. It's different from an ordinary umbrella. Okay. So, you may be familiar with Oliver James. If you're not, I would strongly recommend it. I don't know if anyone's read it, but it goes into the evils of taking this to extreme. And as you can see, it defines affluenza here as a middle-class virus, causing depression, anxiety, addiction, and ennui. And he analyzes how unfortunate it is when people put a premium on how they come across and status and the symbols of status over and above their needs, their psychological needs. And it's a very good book. And he says it accounts for the escalation in depression. The WHO, World Health Organization, say that 1 in 4 people in this century are going to be suffering from depression. It's going to be the most serious illness, bigger even than AIDS, in this century. And that might be why. So, it's where you are aware of yourself as someone different from someone else, but you're not happy about it because of how you measure up to them. So this someone scenario offers, which is standard consumerism, offers you individuality but no fulfillment. You know, you buy the kitchen that's as individual as you are. Yeah. How often do you hear? Or the shoes that say something about you. How often do you hear that kind of slogan? And then you find your neighbour has the same kitchen. They're as individual as you are. Then you get into an arms race of individuality, which you're doomed to lose. No wonder depressed. So then we have the anyone side, the collective identity, which we touched on a little bit, and I don't want to touch too much into fundamentalism, but one could argue that extreme ideologies, not necessarily religious ones, but Nazism and communism, taken to the extreme, are examples where you are subsuming the individual under a collective identity, a collective narrative. And in my own view, that might offer the individual's fulfillment, but it's sacrificing your individuality. So that's not really... So the someone scenario, the anyone scenario, and the no one scenario, none of these, I would suggest, are delivering what we want. What could be the fourth alternative? And those of you who've been waiting patiently, the fourth alternative can probably guess what it is. Is there a fourth alternative? And here it comes. There we are. It's seeing a connection no one else has seen. It is indeed being creative. There we are, so I promise you, we'll get there in the end. I'd like to suggest to you that creativity is a state of mind. And as we've seen, that most of the time our adult minds are working, the world has this personalized significance or meaning. So this, for example, most of the time will trigger a load of associations or connections, rather like, on a more personal level, your mother might. Here we are, here are all the connections it might trigger, which we would call the subconscious. This is a result of various experiences you've had with a cup that might all conjure up and colour your consciousness, all due to your brain connections. But in the future, what we've seen is that these circuits are not going to necessarily be accessed, that things won't have meaning. You'll be in the booming, buzzing confusion, a world that's much more sensory than cognitive compared to nowadays. Now, could it be that these smaller states, as I'm talking about it, these small associations, these small networks, that I think are going to characterize the future, could they characterize creativity? Let's have a think. In childhood, there are fewer connections, and children are creative. In neurodegeneration, there are fewer connections, and you may be aware that quite often as patients are starting to deteriorate in the early stages, they are suddenly creative. They have great bursts of creativity that they didn't have before.